Similarity.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Sometimes we have expectations, and they may or may not be met, and that's part of mental flexibility.
Can we have a little cooler in here, or is that just set and we can't do it?
We probably can.
Okay.
Okay, let's see.
I do not know how to operate that
Change
too.
temperature.
Who's the Naomi? You usually
All
got
right, I
to
put it from 72 to 70. We'll see how that goes. Let me know.
It was on 72.
It says occupied is 72. Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Mental flexibility is one of the characteristics of what they call an effective thinker. Now we all think, but not all of us think very effectively, right? To have mental flexibility means the ability to adapt, to appreciate various points of view, open to new possibilities, to change your ways when necessary, and be willing to learn and grow continuously. It can be defined as a way of thinking or a mental skill, also an attitude or an approach to life. It lets you adapt so that you can orchestrate the best possible outcomes, not a particular outcome all the time, not repeating that insanity cycle. It doesn't mean that you're not entitled to your own opinion, or you're not entitled to your own point of view. It doesn't mean you have to do mental gymnastics and bend over backwards mentally to the point that you're bent out of shape. No, it just means that you're not rigidly contained without identifying times when you might need new information, new facts, or new ways to interpret them. And anyone can develop mental flexibility. It's not something that some people are gifted with and others are not. But few people do it consciously. And to do it consciously, you have to become a little bit more aware of your own thinking processes and more aware of the kinds of situations that you might not have responded to flexibly in the past, and become aware of alternatives. Now, why is this important? Do we think that mental flexibility is important? Do we have times in our lives when the same thing keeps happening over and over again, our approach is the same? You know what? We're not alone in that. I'm going to have Gary, if you can start read that screen, please.
When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them. By this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. This was a remote place, they said, and it was already very late. Send the people away so that they could go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat.
Reasonable approach to a problem. They're hungry, send them away, right? Terrell?
He answered, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "It would take almost a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat?"
Do you know what the outcome was? Dana? What happened?
They took the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Jesus, who blessed them, and multiplied and gave them to eat.
They fed 5,000 people. That's right. Yep. They fed 5,000. That's Mark chapter 6. Mark chapter 8. Ruth, if you could read this scripture, please.
During those days, another large crowd gathered. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, "I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way because some of them have come a long distance."
What happened next? Anyone know? I'll give you a hint.
Similar things.
Yeah. The disciples said, "We're in the middle of a desert. Where are they going to find something to eat?" And Jesus fed 4,000 men, not counting women and children, that day, and collected 4 extra baskets of food. That's verses 1 through 5 is that story. And there's a little anecdote where the Pharisees came to him as the crowd were dispersing, and he complains about the yeast of the Pharisees. Dean, I guess we're up to you.
The disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for 1 loaf they had with them in the boat. Be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. They discussed this with one another and said, "It is because we have no bread."
Jerry?
Well, what are their discussions? Jesus asked them, why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes that fail to see and ears that fail to hear? And don't you remember?
Insanity. They kept getting caught on, we don't have any bread.
Mm-hmm.
And the bread of life was with them. We get caught in that, don't we? And mental flexibility helps us break out of that. A mentally flexible person looks at the world in an open-minded, curious, and unbiased way. Notice that things are not always what they seem on the surface. Avoid snap judgments. Prefers to look carefully at a situation before making an interpretation. And so one important key to flexibility in thinking is how you perceive things. If we tend to be overly rigid and automatic in our perceptions, we can't provide our brains with good information to think with. That data phrase, garbage in, garbage out. If the data is poor, the response is not going to be as favorable. How many squares are in that picture?
Are you saying, so perceive does not mean see?
Over 30.
Most people will see 16. Some will notice the outside and say 17, which we went to right away. And then, if you look a little more closely, there's the 2 by 2 squares.
Oh, I see what you're saying, okay.
There's 3 more right there.
Mhm.
And then there's 3 by 3 squares. And so the book says there's 30.
Oh.
My thought was, once I saw that explanation, there's 31. We tend to perceive in highly automatic ways. We see what we're accustomed to seeing. What's this say?
Jesus is the answer.
Are you sure?
That's what it says. Jesus. Oh, it's
DV.
the.
Did you not learn how to read? No, of course that's not what it is. But why don't you perceive it at first glance? It's because our brains are trained to look for patterns. We recognize patterns and we respond automatically. These are simple, these are tricks. These are visual illusions. But we have to pattern our lives. When you're driving down the highway, you can't think all the time about, am I in the lane? Do I need to change lanes now? Do I need to turn on the turn signal? Do I need to drop my speed 1 mile per hour? We do these things automatically, look for patterns. When there's a pattern of red lights ahead of us, we put our foot on the brake. When our watch says that we're running late, we put our foot on the gas. These are patterns. These are perceptual things. But if you fall into patterns too much, too frequently, if we're a little too biased, then we overlook what might be obvious. Page 5 of your workbook. There's a series of perception puzzles. Now, I'm not going to make you do them, but let's go ahead and look at them. Can anyone tell me what the first one is? Okay. It tells you man overboard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Crossroads.
Backwards glance.
Backwards what?
Backwards glance.
Oh, back to the,
Oh.
just
Just between.
between you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
One out.
Mm-hmm.
Can someone create one?
I seriously have a question.
Here we go.
When you first put that up, it had the on there twice, I didn't
Uh-huh.
even see that, see.
Because you're looking for a pattern. You're looking for a pattern. You know the pattern of a sentence.
You know, what you've read it, or heard it
So many times
you
I
know
don't
what
see
it's
that
supposed
extra the-
supposed to be, and you don't really look.
Yep, you're looking for a pattern. And there's nothing wrong with looking for patterns, but if we're locked into our patterns, we'll miss the times when there's an exception. And how one they can think of, just go ahead and play with it in your own time. You don't have to handle it right now. Just to let you know, you can be, just to remind us, sometimes this is where creativity comes into play. Like I said, once they told me the answer wasn't 16, and it wasn't 17, and it wasn't 30, I could creatively say, well, gee, I actually see 31. So that's part of the creativity. Anyone have any questions or comments before we move on? So the next section is getting free of rigid attitudes. We recognize that we get locked into patterns. How do we break free? What do we mean when we talk about a flexible attitude? A simple definition of an attitude is it's a pattern of thinking that leads you to behave in certain ways. So we're going to talk about a mindset, a momentary attitude, a state of thinking, if you want to call it that way, that causes you to react in a specific way to what you see or hear or experience. Suppose you walk in the front door of a restaurant at midday. The host or hostess is going to assume you're a customer, invite you to be seated, hand you a menu. That works great if you're also a customer. You're going to interact very nicely. But what if you're there to buy the restaurant? Can we see the menu right now? Or have you already researched it? Is that other person, the host or hostess, know what's going on in your mind? When you turn down the menu? No, not necessarily. A mindset, a mental attitude, how you're going to react given certain circumstances can make a big deal. A man walks into a pawn shop with a revolver in his hand. Is he there to buy it? To just sell the gun? Or is he there to hold the pawn shop? Depending on the mindset of the person behind the counter can make a big difference in terms of what happens next. Right? If they misread the situation, it could be dangerous. So if someone walks into the church, if someone walks into your Sunday school class, what mindset do you think they have? Do you know what mindset they have? So if you're prepared to be a little more flexible and to find out, are they coming here to find Jesus? Or are they coming here to challenge? Sometimes it's both, right? Okay? So it's that momentary attitude that governs your behavior. Many communications break down because you're thinking the wrong way. Mindsets is natural routine part of your brain's activity. And you have to be able to adjust if the communication isn't working smoothly. Now, if you assume that the person who walks into your Sunday school class knows how to find the book of John, when you say turn to John, and they don't, are you able to adjust and help them? Or are you aware that they have a challenge? That kind of thing. And so there's a little exercise to help you become aware of mindsets, to become a little more flexible to interpret new ones. So we're going to go to workbook page 6. We have about 5 take to read through the little situation